So there's still some challenges to reaching some of the audiences, or just being cognizant of the fact that you can't, um, for example, you need to make sure that you're building a mobile website that's really lightweight, because that may be their only interaction with your brand is through a mobile device.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Wisenetix Podcast episode. I have the pleasure to have here with me today Sara Steever. Sara, can you say hi to our audience?
Hi, everybody. Ricardo, thanks for inviting me on. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. And guys, Sara here, she's CTO at Paulsen. She has an extended background involved in communication in the ag industry, and she's going to be sharing some very cool stuff with us here today. And Sara, as usual here on our podcast, we like to start learning a little bit more about our guests. So, would you mind sharing a little bit of your background with us? Tell a little bit more about yourself.
So I grew up on a row crop farm in southeastern South Dakota. And back when I was on the farm, which is quite a while back, most farms were the way we were set up. It was about 500 acres. We had all sorts of livestock. We had crops in rotation. We did mostly corn and soybean, but also some alfalfa, like our neighbors did. And of course, we ran cattle. We had sheep. We had chickens. We had hogs. And farms aren't like that anymore, because they've evolved quite a bit. But back then, you got a wide, broad array of experiences on the farm, which I then took forward. And I had a very creative father who was always manufacturing something in his shop in terms of equipment. So he encouraged me to get an art degree because he thought I had talent in that. And then I ended up as a graphics designer. When the internet came along, I was a web developer. And then I had an interest in technology after that. And so I went on to be part of search engines and just now programmatic media and things like that. I was president of our agency for a while. And then right now I'm CTO. So I've had a really great career, largely in technology, but technology as it intersects with creativity, which has been really fun.
Cool stuff. I'm a graphic designer also. That's where I have my background. And I don't know. I think I worked for about 10 years with graphic design, and it's crazy to see the evolution on those 10 years because of internet, and especially now with all the AI stuff that we're gonna be covering a little bit in our conversation. But I started with a printing, as graphic design, it was much more towards printing in the beginning than digital, right? And I remember some exercises we were doing. I don't know if you did that also, but creating all the layouts with those transparent films and just fitting things pieces of it was just it's crazy to see the evolution. And guys, we're gonna talk a little bit more about this soon. And just so we can keep our conversation here, Sara, uh, could you share what are the top 3 experiences or achievements you had so far in your personal professional lives, and what did you learn from these experiences?
Sure. So I probably the first one would have been actually completing college. That was a milestone just because it takes years to get through college. And I think when you go into school, a lot of times you don't really have an idea what you want to do. And so the idea that you come out the other side of that, about half of the people that start college don't complete it. And so I think that's probably one of the most formative early experiences that I had. And I had mentioned my father was really, both of my parents were really supportive of that, and not a lot of people support having their kids go to fine art school. But my parents were, they knew I would do something with whatever gifts I'd been given, I guess. So they were fine with that. And then I freelanced for about a year. Not long after that, I had some agency experience, which is very different from in-house design experiences, and I'd had that as well. But then when I came, out of freelancing for about a year and a half, and came to the agency I'm at, that probably was of those three, going through college, working for myself, and then having an opportunity to work where I'm at now, where I've been for a long time. That was probably the three. And what I learned from those experiences were just that you have to continually reinvent yourself. And just because you get through school and you learn so much when you're in college, and I see new graduates coming out of school now that kind of have that same uh, thought that, like, well, I'm done with that portion of my life and now I'm moving on to just working. And just working is really just learning as well. So, probably the biggest takeaway from any one of those experiences would be you have to learn continually and then be able to apply what you're learning.
Absolutely, learning with practice, and it's crazy when you get out there in the market and you see how far sometimes things are from what you learned in college, and
For sure.
how much you have to learn more. And yeah, it's all about adapting.
Yep, absolutely.
And so your parents supported you in your decision to go with a fine arts, having your bachelor's. But seeing all this transition you had, all the places you've worked, and the things you learned, now looking at where you are right now as a CTO, how would your parents describe what you do today?
I think just because I've been in my career as long as I have, and I've had leadership positions all along the way, but of course, most recently, later in my career, I guess you would say, they would have just described what I do as leadership roles. I don't know that they necessarily understood the technical aspects of what I did at all. And they were college educated, which was kind of unusual because my dad was a World War II vet, right? So there weren't a lot, and especially there weren't a lot of women back then who went to school. But that was really important to my parents that all of their kids got college educations, and so for them it was really just wow that you accomplished anything. They were just proud, like most parents are just proud of what you're doing. But I think they really, if they had to describe something, it would have been more along the lines of, you know, hooray, you've become a great leader. That was really what was important to them.
It's definitely a portion of what you do today, and it's so cool to see like the support. As you mentioned, it's probably something a little bit unusual, back in the day, to support more the studies and make sure that you have your children graduated. So congratulations to your parents on that. And
Yeah, to their
the
credit.
what I found curious, in your journey is that you come from a rural background, right? But
Mhm.
then there is the support for you to study, and then you choose fine arts. You come from a creative family, as you mentioned, your father working in new equipment and so on, and then you move to marketing in agriculture. Uh, can you share how this path that you followed, this journey, um, had an impact in the experiences, how it influenced your career to where you are now?
Yeah. So fortunately for me, I ended up at an agency that made a real commitment to working with rural audiences, and so that's largely in agriculture. And for me, it felt like coming home. Right, I got to go back to my roots in agriculture, and I know I'm super biased about this, but just working with people in agriculture, they're just wonderful people. They are the salt of the earth. They are the people who get up. It's not an 8 to 5 career for them, and they work hard around the clock, and they make sure that we're fed and that we've got security, the security of food and fuel, for the population. Those are the ways economies thrive. So to get to be a part of that, a part of agriculture and a part of marketing, to tell those stories, to really understand those audiences, that aspect of the journey has been probably one of the most fulfilling things for me, is to get to work within agriculture and work with farmers and tell those stories, and really help people understand how broad agriculture is. Right, you can have any career you want and have it in ag. We need people that do accounting, and we need people that understand rural healthcare, and we need engineers, and we need scientists, and we need all of the roles, and we need them all within agriculture. So I guess having that background of growing up on a farm and growing up with parents who supported the journey I wanted to take, even though it looked like I was leaving agriculture, actually ended up bringing me back around to agriculture in the end.
Much easier also to have empathy and understand something when you're a part of it, right?
Sure.
And did you ever like picture and knew that you would work with a like rural audiences and with agriculture and so on, or was something that happened?
Sure. Well, because of just where I'm located geographically, there was always a little bit of, working with agribusinesses in terms of marketing. So I always got to at least dabble in it and keep my hand in it a little bit. But what was really wonderful was to come to a place that made a really conscientious decision that agriculture was going to be at the core of what we did. And in any agency that picks a niche, um, is just better off because you need to understand your audiences as best you can. And so to have the luxury of having an audience that I already understood at least to some degree was really a gift. And to be able to look for people to bring onto the team that are people who share that mission and that passion for what's happening in agriculture. That's a big piece of it too.
Right now we're talking about connecting to audiences, how to communicate with them, and the capacity that you have, lots because of your background, but you also, not that you are not connected anymore to these sort of discussions such as audience, understanding audiences and communicating to them, but today you're in a role uh, that, at least in terms of title, brings us a lot the thing about technology, right? So you're a CTO at Paulsen, and you're working probably with new technologies, new solutions, innovative solutions, targeting rural audiences. What do you think are unique challenges and opportunities, for businesses to engage with ag audiences in the digital age?
Well, I'll start with the challenge side, just because that it's a very real aspect of what we're up against every day as we're just building things out for the audiences that we do communicate with. Is broadband isn't everywhere right now in rural America, so there's still some challenges to reaching some of the audiences, or just being cognizant of the fact that you can't. Um, for example, you need to make sure that you're building a mobile website that's really lightweight, because that may be their only interaction with your brand is through a mobile device. So just understanding that that's a piece of it, and that you have to be thinking about broadband as you're developing your assets. That's one of the challenges. Opportunity wise, I think it's the fact that you can really understand any audience, but understanding how they work along. And I'll just use the customer journey as an example. There's a lot of, depending on which aspect and which niche audience in agriculture you're talking about. If you're trying to reach veterinarians, they're going to be in a very different situation than someone who's actually the manager of a swine barn, things like that. So there are niches within agriculture that you have to think about who are the gatekeepers and influencers on their decision making process. And for a lot of farmers and producers, like say on the beef side or the dairy side, that veterinarian is a huge influence. And so they're going to talk to that vet at some point before they buy a certain product or they change up their feed. Um, if you want to talk about seed, we work with a lot of seed companies, then the agronomist is going to be a gatekeeper. And then kind of overarching all of that are how the retailers work in agriculture. And those retailers end up being, along that customer journey, very influential at the end. Like they're going to get that little bit of advice at the end, even though in the awareness phase they may have taken in, heard your radio spots, saw your print ad in what we would call our endemic publications. They're in the mindset of their operation while they're seeing your brand, and there's a great halo effect from that. But until they actually have that need and they go into that consideration phase, and finally make that purchase, there's a lot of other touch points that aren't traditional and that are a lot harder to reach and have influence over. And you have to think about that as you're working within those audiences. So lots of niches within agriculture. Each one of them has got a separate path and touch points that you need to be considering. And you can lean on technology a lot, and we do that, and we build out technical audiences with pixels and through things like lookalikes and the data. Working with partners that have very good data is a big leg up for any marketing firm. But there's a lot of different aspects of it, and so I guess that's how I would see that.
Absolutely, and how you look at the data, right?
Hmm.
How you analyze that. I 100% agree with what you're saying, especially about understanding it's not just rural audiences. You have multiple personas within these audiences, as you mentioned. For example, veterinarians or nutritionists. Those are people that tend to have a stronger connection with technology. They're kind of like scientists, so they're all the time, consuming content and reading articles, those sort of things. So having access to it, and
Hmm.
the relationship they would have with technology and the media would be one versus other audiences. And again, they are gatekeepers or direct influencers of the people who are maybe do not have this strong connection, but will make the final decision. And I love the thing about the channels also, right? Retailers and how you build your way through them, and the need that you, depending on what products you're selling, you have on relying on good retailers, good distributors.
Hmm.
One beautiful thing for me also is that, as you mentioned, there are multiple touch points. Like sometimes I'm having discussions with people. Like we do podcasts as we're doing here, but targeting especially technical audiences within specific industries in the ag. And sometimes people are looking people that work in communication are, or even their superiors are looking for clear like ROI, return over investment metrics, which is something that you should always go after. But the thing is, the sales cycle, depending on what you're selling and who is buying, can be really long, and they're not going to buy it because they saw one printing pay uh, one ad in a magazine, or they listen to one podcast, or because one visit of a salesperson. It's the most of times it's a decision based on all sorts of influences and touch points, and every different approach is a different piece in this puzzle, right? You need to have this complete approach, and try to impact impact the audience through the most channels you can, right?
Yep.
One thing that I always talk to other people in the ag, like events, trade shows, they are amazing because you have the chance to meet so many, I don't know, producers or suppliers, whoever you're looking after, in 2 or 3 days, have great connections one on one in front of them, and it's something that it's easier to measure. Like, hey, I met with them there, we started a conversation, we closed the business. But those one-on-one and in-person interactions, which are awesome and the best for me, there's there's a great limitation to them. You cannot be in front of those people every day in person, having your sales team there, or being every day at a different trade show. So in the other days in the year when you're in front of them, you're not in front of your audience. How do you communicate with them? How do you make your presence stronger? And there where the digital comes with a lot of tools and things that make easier for us to at least have a better idea in terms of numbers of how many people saw something, clicked, and this and so on. So it's a beautiful world.
Yeah, it is, and I hate to see people just lean on the things that they can measure, just because they can, and I think we often fall into that trap, especially if you feel like your budget's a little bit limited, and who doesn't think that their budget, there's never enough money to do all the things you want to do. But one of the things that we still find to be very, very true is there's still um, the reach that you get through traditional media is always going to be greater than what you can find digitally. But you can get your frequency with digital. So we lean on digital for that, just because there's a lot more avenues. But there's also, I think, a shortage of, at least with our endemic platforms, there can be a shortage of inventory. We'll just put it that way, because as we all know, ag's consolidating. There are fewer and fewer farms, fewer and fewer dairies, fewer and fewer swine operations, but they get bigger. So the people that you need to reach, of course, they become a more powerful and important decision maker, um, even as they surround themselves with the people that end up influencing the decision that they do make. But trying to reach them becomes a bit of a game, in terms of just those impressions aren't available. So then we step outside of that, right into the non-endemic world where we've got programmatic, and we can obviously with technology. You guys talk about this all the time. With technology, we can follow them around anywhere, and so there's also that balance of not overwhelming them with your message, and just being mindful of not having that halo that you get when you're in the endemic world, and they're thinking about their operation at the time. So lots of touch points for sure, and lots of ways to think about, what is the best mix of media, and that's something that's been fun to see evolve over time. We wasn't all that long ago, and we had clients who were like, I don't think that digital thing's going to last, and I don't think that's going to work. And they just wanted to stay in the traditional realm. And then we've got other clients who want to go completely to digital because they don't understand how the ag audiences work, and they just want to be able to measure everything that they do. So it's definitely a mix. Technology helps us sometimes, and sometimes it's a bit of a detriment.
It's good to have both, right?
Yeah,
And, you
for
can
sure.
you can play with both. So yeah, it's about finding the balance and the right channels for the right time also.
Yeah, and one of the things that's always been interesting to me in terms of measuring is just what you talked about earlier, where it takes so long for that decision to come about, and you can, if you can't capture that and understand how many touch points and how long it actually took before they came back to your website and converted, I think you miss out on a lot of things because you get impatient and you change your tactics up too quickly, and don't let those audiences have a chance to bloom and grow and get optimized.
Yeah, growing audience is always a challenge, and it's a long-term game. Like it's not from night to day or day to night. Uh, you're gonna have build audience, so it's and that's the thing, right? Sometimes the plan. I see this happening. I don't know. The marketing team has an idea. They plan. They start executing. Results don't come that quick, and then at some point you start having. Maybe it's something internal from the marketing team, like, hey, was it the right choice? But lots of times it's also a little bit of pressure on, like, hey, we're not seeing the results from the guys on the top, and that when you do as we work with podcasts, we also help companies. No, we don't only have our podcast, we also help companies producing their own podcasts, which is something awesome. We see it that in the future, probably most brands will have, like, you have your LinkedIn page or website, you might have also your podcast in the future, but it's like you're gonna have to put effort there, and it's not gonna be with 1 year that you're gonna have all the results you're expecting, right? It's something you need to trust the process, keep going, and it's part of the game. And in terms of practical tips and tools, could you share some of those that business in the ag could use to have more um, effectiveness when they're using their when they're doing their digital marketing or using online platforms to connect with rural audiences?
Yeah, a couple things. One would be just get really good at the block and tackle of building audiences, because that and getting your own first party data, because that's going to become more and more important, and you really should think about it as an asset, just like you would think of any other asset that you have. But it is the asset that essentially takes you into the future. So you have to be constantly collecting first party data, keeping it cleaned, and make sure that you're refreshing it and looking for opportunities to build upon it. And then also building out the other technical pieces of it, not just customer data or prospect data, but just using technology to expand on those audiences over time. I think that's a pretty key piece of it. And then the other part is, so you can reach those people, but you've got to get them motivated to do something, and to think about how, I'll go back to the customer journey. When people are in, I'll give you print as an example. When we look at print and think about that, people are a lot more receptive to new ideas when they're kicking back and they're looking at a magazine, and it doesn't feel intrusive. When you move into the digital front, then you're, even with a big screen, so with a desktop or laptop, you're still interrupting them. And so you want to make sure you're thinking about that a little bit differently. And then when you get down to the small screen, now you're really intruding upon someone when you're there. So you really need to think about that. So we look at the messaging that we do for our clients is it's got to be three things. It's got to be unique, it's got to be compelling, and it's got to be believable. So once you can get that little Venn diagram of things and you get your messaging nailed down, then you need to think individually about how people are interacting with it across all of those channels and mediums.
Awesome. I love this. I love this. We'll probably steal this when we're planning our mobile interruptions.
Yeah, interruptions.
uh, and Sarah, keeping on on this arena where we discuss tools and things that we can use today, we have AI.
Mm-hmm.
It's here. It's not in the future. It's present, and most of I believe that just like other things that we had on the internet, it's coming to stay, right? How do you see that AI and other emerging technologies as a CEO are shaping the future, specifically in the agricultural marketing? And what potential benefits or challenges do they bring to the table?
I think it's already had a pretty enormous impact. AI has been around since punch cards, just for a long time. We've been using it. It's been building and building. And in some ways, agriculture really has been the vanguard for how AI has been adopted. So anything from just auto steer back in the day or flow controls, and being able to kind of regulate how you were spraying, things like that. Taking the data in now, your yield monitors are telling you a story about your field, and you're trying to, overlay that with other things in terms of inputs and that aspect of artificial intelligence. I think, when Chat GPT came into the world, and all of a sudden people got all very excited about it, like AI just happened, and like, well, it's we're like decades into this now, and especially in agriculture. It's been pretty transformative because it's, as you know, labor is a big issue in agriculture, and so finding good help that wants to stay in the really rural parts of our country has been a challenge for us. And so to be able to use not necessarily robotics as much as just things like auto steer, like things, eventually as we move to autonomous tractors and grain wagons and things like that, how much that's helping out our farms as they consolidate has a lot to do with it. But if you move into just the realm of rural America, not just in agriculture, I think generative AI is really kind of an equalizer. So you may not have a lot of resources and a lot of ways to start up a new business. And so agriculture, not everybody on the farm is farming. So a lot of times you've got maybe either the husband or wife or the kids that you want to bring back onto the farm need other ways that they can be employed. And so a field like marketing, generative AI is a great equalizer, and it gives tools at your fingertips that you may not have had. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. Like, does this mean that we need to move even more quickly in fields like marketing, or fields that have a lot of that are going to be impacted, I should say, in a big way, like accounting, lawyers, medical field. Some of these ways that the data goes into these large language models and it comes back out as advice is going to transform a lot of aspects of rural America that aren't necessarily tied to agriculture, but will lift agriculture at the same time. So I'm excited about it. I think it's a marvelous thing for our future, and it's a wonderful thing for rural America to be able to have access to tools like this. So I'm excited about it.
With all of these new tools and things, especially AI on in the way that we're seeing now, which is like through a ChatGPT where you can solve problems, very quick on your computer. That's been my reality for most of my life, working in my computer, not like in farms and so on. But at the same point that sometimes I get a little bit scary on like where is this leading us, which there is room for questioning and discussions on where it can get. I also see that uh, it gives more room for good ideas to thrive,
Yeah,
because lots of times people have the ideas, right? I don't. The big thing is making them happen and executing them. And today, I don't know how many times I've seen this post, but it's like, hey, you don't need $1 to start a business, and then they bring all the different tools you have to create, I don't know, designs, to create content, to do this and do that. And most of them are, they have some free version for you to do. So it's a cool thing. Like, you need less resources, like people and big groups of people to execute our ideas. So I think that's maybe a possibility for an era of ideas, really leveraging the ideas and bringing them out of paper.
Yeah.
Before, you also mentioned customer journey, right? Which is part of the work you do. Could you share some of the most aspects that you consider, essential, or the most important aspects when you're designing a customer journey? And are there any essential tools and key principles that you rely on when you're doing this?
Boy, the tools vary. I guess probably the most important tool you would have would be just having an open mind and really thinking about that. And for us, we end up doing research on our own in order to make sure that we're paying attention to the nuances that are happening with any one of those audiences that we've got. So that piece of it tied to the customer journey. Persona development, I think, is a piece of it too. And that ties directly into things like attitudinal research, which is a component of what we do depending on the situation. So knowing that people don't always respond demographically to things. You might say, well, I'm only going to target people 18 to 35 because they all think the same way. Absolutely, they don't all think the same way, and being able to tie into that to a degree. I mean, you don't want to get too granular because at the end of the day, you may not have the bandwidth to actually put together 10 different types of messaging just to try to move someone down their customer journey. But I think that's in terms of tools, it's for us, those tools can definitely be research based as we're thinking about it. So we have an online focus group tool that we use that makes it easier to do qualitative interviews in a way that it's actually kind of a hybrid between qualitative and quantitative, which is helpful. That attitudinal research I had mentioned. One of the last ones that we did on rural lifestyle was really understanding why people were migrating out of cities. And what we ended up learning was that there are people who just really wanted more space. It wasn't that they wanted to move into rural America necessarily, but they really wanted more space. But they would identify themselves as wanting to migrate out of cities because their thought was, I'll never have more than I've got right now as long as I'm in a city. I think those attitudes may have evolved as the pandemic wrapped up mercifully, and we're moving on. But understanding the attitude and why people do things is oftentimes more important than who they are, because to get into their head, you're going to want to know why. So a lot of times our as I mentioned, our tools are really research-based tools in order to really understand that customer journey piece.
Awesome. Yeah. When we do our analytics for the impact that we're having, to understand really the performance of our products, uh, if you if you rely only on the information you get from platforms like YouTube or streaming platforms, basically the type of information they will give you is so, not completely, but today the way maybe it was useful for when you're looking at marketing, I don't know, decades ago, age and those sort of things. And that's what they give you: age, country, sometimes their gender, which is not how people and communities organize anymore, especially after internet and social media,
Yeah.
where people are grouping much more for their interests and their lifestyle and the way they see the world than necessarily the country they live or any of those other information. So it's nice to see. And I really like that you guys do your own research. So that's really good. Not something easy to do, in my experience. I also worked with branding a little bit in the past, and I always try to do some good research, like before I start anything. Like, hey, we're gonna spend the first 2 months, 1 month, 2 months of the project. I'm not gonna be creating things. We're gonna be talking to your listeners, to your customers, to your audiences. So then we can start thinking about what we need as a solution, right? And you guys conduct your own research. I wanted to know that if you can share some key insights or trends that you guys are noticing when you do your research, and how these insights are impacting your strategies.
Yeah, so it kind of depends. Some of the research we do is just really for specific brands that we're working with, and I, those are invaluable in trying to craft the messages that you want and really helping people differentiate themselves from their competitive set. And a lot of brands, I would say, don't, just have never been exposed to what you can actually learn if you take the time to find those things out, and to push beyond what you can read in other third party research. I had mentioned the rural migration piece that we had done, and really understanding why some people wanted to leave cities and move out into the country, and just really wanting more space. There were definitely a group of people who, they wanted to be able to put in a half-acre garden, and they wanted to have animals and those types of things, and they really do feel like the rural lifestyle is like the best possible life they could have. Breathing fresh air, not having to see your neighbors every day, those types of things. Those are definitely a mindset of people that were that way. But just in general, for rural lifestyle, we did find 5 different types of audiences we had, and we did sort of bucket them by age, not specific age, but some were younger and some were older, and that did tend to come out, which it doesn't always come out in attitudinal research. But we had young affluents who had a specific mindset. We had older inactives, people who um, were affluent and were able to move into the country, but weren't looking for like that half-acre garden that went with it, or to have a herd of cattle with them. People who are just really independent thinkers, and they want to be self-sufficient. Middle-aged connectors, so those are people who wanted to move into a community and have like-minded people around them. So that was one of the set of research that we did. Another one was on electric vehicles and kind of the adoption of that. One of the things that's really important in for all of us, but is unique in rural America, is just how the electrical co-op systems work, and how people get their electricity in the country. And so we wanted to study and see, do we have the infrastructure in place to actually support the charging of electric vehicles, and how do people in rural areas even feel about that? And just in general, they are not excited about it, because they're very concerned that they won't have that they won't be able to do what they need to do, travel the distances that they do in the weather that they do with an electric vehicle. So that was important for our clients to understand. So lots of different ways we've approached research and lots of different topics over the years.
Awesome. Yeah, I always remember when I think about this sort of research. If I'm not wrong, it was Pepsi. I don't know if it was Pepsi or Coke when they were. And again, we are designing solutions for the world, and we try to we do our best to put ourselves in our customers' shoes, right? So you can
Mm-hmm.
provide with a decent solution for them. But it's really hard if you're just guessing, if you're not like in front of them and asking them, you know, how do you feel about this? How and Pepsi or Coke, I think it was when they were entering the Japanese market. I think one of the like they noticed that the big packages were not like I don't know we use liters here in Brazil, so 2 liter sodas they were not selling. People were not buying, and they were trying to understand why they're not buying the big packages. And at the end, it wouldn't just it just wouldn't fit their refrigerator, so it was too big for their. So it's not the type of research we're talking about where you're asking people, but you need to. And
Yes.
I just love how this how a simple conversation and some good questions can bring insights to you that will basically change all your approach to what you're doing as a solution. And yeah, I just loved it. And let me see if I can get more information on that. I'm gonna drop you an email to see some of this research. Another thing, so CTO at Paulsen, but in your background, you also were the president of NAMA, and I wanted to understand. It's a big thing. I haven't been to any of the conferences yet. Let's see if I can attend to one of NAMA's conferences. But not only a conference, you guys are our group, and you work with marketing in the ag. And what I wanted to understand is what type of initiatives and strategies when you were there, uh, you guys champion in order to advance the field of agricultural marketing.
Yeah, I have been a member of NAMA for probably 20 years, and that's our industry organization. We have a counterpart in Canada that's the Canadian Agri Marketing Association. But NAMA um, kind of runs on three pillars. One is professional development, and then leadership opportunities, and then just education on what's happening and building your network. So, bringing those three things together. If you, as you're going through your career in ag marketing, is a huge benefit. So just knowing that those are kind of the three pillars we operate under. And then we also support students that are coming out of universities, primarily land grant, but universities that are studying marketing and agriculture. And so we do a lot of events. So you can start out with boot camp and you go on to the fall conference and then the spring conference. And then there are local chapters. So it's pretty, it's a big organization. There's, I think, 1,200 members, if I'm not mistaken. So one of the things that they do is, look for people to rise up through the ranks and work at the chapter level, work at the national level, work on the conferences, and then they have an executive team. So I got chosen to be on that executive team, and then you're there for 3 years, and then you have a 3-year path to become the president. Well, that happened to coincide with the pandemic, right when I was taking over the president's role. So in the March of 2020, I was taking over that role in April, and so we had to pivot pretty quickly to moving everything online. So that's probably, I guess, what I would look back on as the most important role that I had within that organization was just supporting the team of people that needed to move everything we would normally do in person online very quickly, and then also moved to supporting people in a different way as time went by. And so we moved to more webinars, and then just having the opinion of, or just the idea that you would be watching to see what was coming and changing in marketing and making sure you're bringing those resources in so that ag marketing moves along with the rest of marketing in the world. So that's probably, I guess, what was most interesting, and during a crazy time, was fun to be part of that.
I can imagine. Yeah, big challenge. And we when we were just thinking about pandemics, when the our company started, it started in 2019 in the US. So we surfed, and we are fully digital, so it was kind of natural for us to surf the wave. But
Mm-hmm.
it was crazy the challenge that was for companies, to suddenly you need to make sure you cannot have personal contact. How are you selling and keeping, the growing the relationship with your customers and everything else? I think it was for anyone, especially for a president in an organization as NAMA. Um, it was a big challenge, and but yeah, I think we grew a lot in terms of knowledge and how to do things digitally because of that. It was definitely a big step for humanity.
For sure, for all of us, touched everybody.
Everyone, yeah. Wow. It seems like it was a decade ago now, and I'm thinking, and it was crazy times. Uh, and Sarah, as someone who's deeply involved in understanding medias and audiences, what advice would you give to ag professionals that are looking to craft compelling messaging and content that resonates with agricultural producers and consumers? And I know we probably touched a few of these things already with the research, but what else would you add to that?
Yeah, I guess I would just add, you need to have authenticity in your voice. If you can come across as authentic, um, especially I think as generative AI becomes more and more prevalent, We don't want everybody ending up being really cynical because they feel like everything was generated through a large language model. You need to still bring that true and genuine, unauthentic voice. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is to actually know your audience and actually talk to them and see what resonates with them.
So wrapping up here, we're getting to the end of our conversation. Thanks a lot for all the insights so far. Just before we jump to the closing questions, I wanted to understand what are the top takeaways or principles you believe that are essential for anyone looking to excel in communication and marketing in the agricultural sector or in the rural world, if you want to make it a little bit broader.
Yeah, well, I kind of had mentioned this earlier, but just this idea that you've got to be continually learning, that growth mindset. Things are going to continue to change, and they're going to change in a way that's even more astonishing than it already is, right? You wake up every morning and there's some new news about a platform or something that you feel like you've got to try out. But just that being open to continuing to learn, and I guess adopting a growth mindset. And the only way you can adopt a growth mindset is to continue to push yourself into areas where you may or may not be comfortable and where you're going to make mistakes. And you have to get comfortable with that idea that you're probably going to screw some stuff up. But that's kind of the world we live in right now. Is just that's what it is. So you also have to learn to be compassionate with yourself so that you can continue to grow and move past the mistakes you do make.
Cool. My next question, so you kind of answered my next question, at least one of the. I want to ask you what would be a piece of advice you would give to someone starting their career. For sure, keep learning, open-minded. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think you need to become a good communicator, and I think one of the best ways you can do that, of course, is to be well read, but to also write. A lot of people feel like they want to move right to public speaking or getting their ideas out there, and it's essential, I think, to be well read, be a good reader, but also be a writer. So don't just lean on Chat GPT. I mean, you can learn things through Chat GPT or Claude or any one of the other models for sure, but don't rely on that because there's something that happens within your brain when you are writing that helps you organize your thoughts, um, and really make sure that your ideas are concrete, and that then gives you the ability to get those little phrases down that are going to help you be good in communicating your ideas.
Beautiful. Any books or podcasts, movies, documentaries you'd like to recommend to our audience?
Yeah, read the book Tilt. That's a great book for understanding what's happening in the world of business, and that applies to agribusinesses as well. I think that's a great book. And for a podcast, I think if you want to stay on top of what's happening in AI, it's called This Day in AI. I'm sorry, This Week in AI. There's also a This Day in AI, also good, but This Week in AI is really a good one because it makes it fun. And they're constantly testing to see which LLMs are on the way up and which ones are on the way down. So it's very informative.
Awesome. So Tilt and This Week in AI,
Yep.
good ones. I'm going to check them out. And for us to wrap up here, Sarah, where can our listeners find you online?
Best place is Paulsen.agency. That's kind of where we put all of our research and where we put all of our thinking articles and things like that.
Perfect. Sarah, thanks a lot. It was a great conversation for me. Learned a lot, and it's nice to see the different views and insights that you guys had at Paulsen and your own insights. So I really appreciate for all the great content you shared with us. I'm sure that the audience plugged in and it's still with us here listening. And to everyone that was listening to us so far, thanks a lot for your company. And we hope to see you on our next episode.
Take care.